Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Tuesday topic. Today's topic is white spaces and black faces, and our presenter today is Maurice Cottman, the director of the Student Center and Multicultural Programming here at Drexel University. While we're waiting for a few more folks to join us and for everybody's microphones to get kicked in, just a quick plug about a couple other Tuesday topics coming up. Next week, Tuesday, November the 17th, we have everything you ever wanted to know about how to submit grants and more. And then the week after that, session that we're really looking forward to, same story, different generation, barriers to students in higher education. That's going to be a panel discussion led by Rachel DeLauder, who's a member of our board of equity, diversity, and inclusion. And we've got a nice panel of recent alumni and some current students to speak about their experience. So we hope you join us for that. And then we're going to take a little break over the holiday and then come back Tuesday, January the 12th with Understanding and Respecting Gender, a guide for faculty and professional staff. All righty. So thanks. Welcome. Maurice, take it away.
Thank you. So before I start, I just want to say, once I go into the whole presentation mode, feel free to unmute yourself if you have any comments, any questions, anything that you want to elaborate on. Even if you want to just make a comment for something we're talking about, please feel free. I am terrible at looking at the chat while I'm presenting, so I'm gonna keep it real with you. I probably won't see that until the end of it. So feel free to unmute yourself at any point during this entire presentation that we're doing. So give me 1 second and I'm going to share my screen. So just like that, right before we started, I was talking to Darren and I was like, my computer has been failing me like crazy this entire time. So literally I'm waiting for my presentation to pop back up. There we go. I want to know, can everybody see this?
It's still loading.
Still loading, of course.
There we go.
Good?
Yep.
Is it in full screen?
Yep.
Cool. So we're going to be talking about white spaces and black faces. So when we go into this presentation, this workshop, I just want to give a caveat that many of the spaces that we occupy as people probably are predominantly white spaces or white spaces that we don't even recognize are so. And when we speak about white spaces, I'm gonna give you a breakdown of how we're gonna view it throughout the presentation. But I want you to remember that even as we work to improve places like Drexel, this is still a predominantly white space, specifically in different pockets of the university. So first thing first, we don't have a lot of time. Each one of the things that we talk about today could be an hour in itself. So we're going to go over some stuff rather quickly. We're going to try to make it as clear and concise as possible. And remember, please feel free to unmute yourself at all if there's anything that you want to elaborate on. So who am I? I am Maurice Cottman. I'm the director for the Student Center for Diversity and Inclusion. We have a physical space on campus. It is on the second floor of the Rush building. Inside of the SCDI, we've been home to a lot of minoritized and marginalized communities since the inception of the SCDI. It's been a home for a lot of our students specifically to find a place that they can call home. Inside of the SCDI, we do about 40 to 50 programs a year. We offer free resources year round whenever at all possible, but we also do things like community building. Second part of my job is I am the identity-based contact for 68 different student organizations. That's ethnic, cultural, regional, gender-specific, sexual orientation, spiritual and religious life. All of those groups are my groups that I oversee. I do educational conversations like this here, workshops, guest spots in classrooms, at retreats, at departmental meetings, and pretty much anything in between. And finally, if I didn't do enough for you, I am the co-chair for the undergraduate student life section of the Anti-Racism Task Force. But really at the core of who I am, I'm a Black man. You know, I'm a Black man who's existed in a lot of white spaces throughout probably half of his life at this point. So whether it be high school, college, work, my careers after college, where I work today, I've had to exist in white spaces on a level that I probably didn't realize until I got a little bit older. This presentation was created through my own personal experiences, things I've went through, conversations I've had. A lot of the stuff you will see is part of my intellectual property, but a lot of the stuff I'm also giving you is historical facts that you may not realize as we continue on through our journey together. First things first, I like to put a little bit of a caveat. All Black people are people of color, but not all people of color are Black. Let me say it again. All Black people are people of color, but not all people of color are Black. There's differences. There are different needs, different wants, different problems. When we start to look at a group of people as all one thing, we start to miss the individuals, the minorities in that group, and we probably miss everybody. Also, all Black people aren't created the same. We're not a monolith. We have Africans, we have African Americans, we have people who consider themselves Black in the entire diaspora of Africa. We have Caribbean people. There's many different layers to being Black. And also, when you look at Black people, you can't look at Black people as one person can speak for everybody. I'm going to say Black a lot in this presentation, but I can't speak for all Black people. But remember that even when you think about the different levels of Black people, we may not even always agree. As they say in the community, all skin folk ain't kinfolk. So you sometimes don't ever really know who is speaking for whom. That's why you got to do a little bit of research. You got to stay educated. Like every other community, like the Black community, like white communities, like brown communities, and so forth, we are a constantly evolving community. We are constantly in a state of progression. So what you might have known last year, last week, last month, may be different this year, or next month. So kind of stay on top of things. So what is a white space? I'm going to give you 3 ways to look at white spaces as we continue on in this presentation. At any point in time, feel free to challenge what I'm going to say. Feel free to ask me to elaborate a little bit more, but I'm trying to make it as simple as possible. We could have added more than 3, but I think 3 is a good number. First things first, all structures created for the appreciation, celebration, and/or education of white people. One more time, all structures created for the appreciation, celebration, and/or education of white people. When you think about this, think about schools, think about museums, think about monuments, think about statues. Number 2, any operation that was created without the hopes, dreams, and aspirations considered for non-white people. Once again, any operation that was created without the hopes, dreams, and aspirations considered for non-white people. And finally, any institution that actively demoralizes communities of color. Any institution that actively demoralizes communities of color. Governments can be focused on uplifting non-people of color. Domestic terrorism, terrorist groups like the KKK, those are white spaces. We have to realize what they are, where they become, and anything that falls in here can be a white space. All 3 are not required. That's something we got to remember. You may not feel like a place that you operate in or a space that you have control over hits all 3 of these, and that's okay. If it hits one of these, then it could potentially be a white space. So when we think about white spaces, in the first one, all structures created for the appreciation, celebration, and/or education of white people, it lacks growth. And what I mean by that is when something is created for only one group, when we have blinders on, sometimes it's hard for us to evolve within that community. If you stay insulated, sometimes you have a cap on where you can go. It lacks complexity. We have this versus that mentality. People are complex. Nobody is only one thing. I am Black, I am a man, I am a Black man. Just because I am Black does not make me a man. Just because I am man does not make me Black. But when we focus solely on one part of a person's identity, we kind of have to separate things. This is for us, this is for them. And that's why complexity tends to get lost. It lacks context, the eradication of others. You might think of this as whitewashing. When we are so hyper-focused on our own people, no matter what people it is, sometimes truth becomes fiction and our opinions become truth. So when you think about things like history, we start to eradicate anybody who doesn't look like the people who are supposed to be in those spaces, and we start incorporating our own selves into those stories. When we talk about politics, when we talk about religion, when we talk about the educational system, all of these things can be whitewashed depending on who is playing them and who's in control. Realize that. Any operation that was created with the hopes, dreams, and aspirations considered for non-white people. This creates a hierarchy. It's us or them. For some reason, when these spaces are created, we don't think about the word and. It's always us or them. And this is a bad way that we kind of go about in America. If you are pro-Black, it doesn't mean you're anti-white. But far too often, when we think about the dominant white groups that happen in society, it is a lot of times us or them. If you aren't for one group, then you're automatically opposing another. Unification is an impossibility. Me cannot equal we if we don't unify. If we can't look past ourselves and past our own specific communities or the communities that were not made for us, we can never really have true, honest integration. And not integration like it has to be quote unquote separate but equal, but integration in a mode where you can look at things and realize, okay, we are not serving all of the people who inhabit that space. But when we don't look past ourselves, we can never actually see those other people, even if they have to also be a part of that community. It can stunt growth. There's a glass ceiling aspect. I said it a little bit earlier, but when you start to put blinders on you don't actually see what's around you, you can never actually evolve to the next level. You can never bring people along with you because you are one-track minded. We have to get past that one-track mindedness and open up these white spaces so that that glass ceiling can break. The more that we incorporate other people's views, philosophies, and thoughts, the stronger our beliefs can actually become. It's not always that somebody's bringing in something opposite and it would eradicate everything. Sometimes hearing a different point of view, speaking to different people, understanding a different culture can actually strengthen your own. So the last one, any institution that actively demoralizes communities of color. This is a quote by the great David Chappelle. We are looking for a livable level of decency. We are looking for a livable level of decency. This is actually impossible if we're only creating white spaces. Because how can we have decency if we are neglecting all the people who are not the majority? The system is not broken. It's working the way it was designed. Now, this is something my students have heard me say over and over again, but I mean it. Because the thing about the system is it was created for people to oppose other people. So when we say the system is broken, we're actually not giving it justice for working the way it's supposed to. That's why we can't say that the system is broken. We need to say that we need to change the system. The system is working perfectly fine, but the system was not always designed for all people. It was designed for a certain subset of people. Hidden terminology, dog whistles, coded language, false narratives. These things are common in media specifically. So if you think about hidden language, think about terms like inner city. Think about terms like urban. Think about terms like Black on Black crime. And if you're talking about changing the narrative, think about what happened with Colin Kaepernick. It went from him kneeling about police brutality 4 years ago to him hating the government, to him not respecting the NFL, to him not respecting American liberties and freedom, to him hating the military. And now it circles back to saying, oh yeah, he was kneeling for about police brutality. Realize when those narratives are changing, sometimes we have to read between the lines in order to know what the real story is. But you can't just take things on face value. You have to double check those articles. You have to read past the headlines. You have to talk to the communities that you are learning about in order to understand if what you're learning is actually accurate. All of that to say, just to exist as a Black person can be exhausting. I know when I wake up as a Black man in America, coming to a predominantly white campus, many things run through my mind before I even get to the campus. First thing is, when I leave out of my apartment, I hope to make it back, but I don't assume I will. Because just to be Black in a place that wasn't designed for you, that means there's a lack of care, there's a lack of safety, and safety is a privilege that most Black people don't understand or know, probably throughout their entire life. When you're in meetings and you're a Black person and the meeting is a predominantly white meeting, which means it's a predominantly white space, you have to realize how high your voice is going. You have to realize what your face looks like. You have to think about how people are interpreting you. So when you're a Black person in white spaces, you don't only have to think about your identity, you have to think about how your identity intersects with the other people's identities who are not you. And for the Black people in the room who've been in these spaces, we all look around the space and look for the one other person, even if they ain't Black, as long as they're a person of color, and give them the head bob, give them a little nod, be like, I see you, you see me, we in this together. I don't even know your name, but we got this thing going together. See, when you Black, you're always thinking about everybody else as it relates to yourself, as opposed to being only able to focus on yourself. Because when you come from communities where it seems like things have not been designed to help you. Sometimes it feels like they've been designed to harm you. You have to think about what can you do to circumvent that. And then when it's all said and done, you still have to think about what am I doing to actually live my life? Now you can kind of see how it can be exhausting. Every day for a person of color, specifically a Black person operating in white spaces, is a day where we're on a tightrope. And that tightrope may not be as high some days, but it's pretty much always elevated in some type of way. That's why you got to think about this idea of Black Lives Matter. And I don't mean Black Lives Matter as the company, the corporation, the nonprofit. No, I mean Black Lives Matter as the movement. Black Lives Matter as the purpose. Because we're going to talk about policing, of course, because I can't not when we talk about these topics and these issues. But you have to think about it in a holistic approach. It's not just about the brutalization of Black bodies that have happened by the hands of police officers, but it's also about the systematic oppression. It's about the whitewashing of history. It's about the changing of culture. It's about the stripping of identities in order to fit a narrative that is not your own. It's about trying to fit a square block in a round peg and then get mad at the block when it doesn't work. Black Lives Matter is not just a phrase. It's not just a corporation. It's a way of living. It's a way to identify with something greater than yourself. Because for far too long, systematically and historically, the world has shown us that we didn't matter the way in which we should. The world has shown us that we are not on the same level of human as other people are viewed as. And the thing is, when we think about Black Lives Matter, people tend to contest it for very reasons. So when they say the phrase Black Lives Matter, for some reason, people feel like they need to interject. And when you see Black Lives Matter, think about it a little bit differently. We're not saying only Black Lives Matter. We're not saying Black Lives Matter more. We're thinking about it like Black Lives Matter too. Black Lives Matter too, because the world, specifically America, has shown us that we have not mattered for far too long. And the direct opposition of things like Blue Lives Matter completes the divide and the wedge between the Black community and policing. See, America overall is a white space. The way in which America operates comes from white ideologies, and police are no different. So when people rise up and say Blue Lives Matter, first and foremost, blue lives aren't a race, it's a job. You can get another one. I can't get a different identity in reality. That right there should negate everything, because when you say Blue Lives Matter in opposition to Black Lives Matter, that is now putting Black people once again against police. And that's why this whole thing started. That's the context, that's the hidden language. That's showing you that they're trying to stop progression by continuing the aggression. And once again, to say history tells us we don't matter. And there's many accounts to realize this. The first official police force was created in Boston, Massachusetts in the 1800s to protect property and land. The Southern states saw that and they brought the same ideologies to the South to protect their property and their land, and the property happened to be slaves. And the police in the South only had 3 jobs. The first was to catch slaves who ran away. The second one is to shut down slave revolts. And the third one is to punish any slave who they deem to be harmful to the rest of the population. That's pretty much it. So from the beginning of policing, there's been a dubious relationship with Black bodies. So you can't expect a system that was basically created to stall and harm Black people to be for Black people without actually addressing the true issues and problems. There's been many scientific studies that have come out about how white people in general, and I can't speak for all white people, of course, but white people in general believe that Black children are a lot older than they appear. That Black people don't feel the same level of pain as other races. That Black people are inherently more aggressive than other races. So when those things are naturally part of our lexicon in the way we create, when these spaces are being brought up, when we are creating policies and legislations, when we are creating these communities, if that's the base level, then we'll never get that much further. Because the thing is, you have to see people for who they are. It can't just be everybody's the same. So look how great life is. When you try and pretend to be colorblind, you're actually stripping people of their identity. So I wanted to put this card up on the screen because I think it just brings home that point I'm trying to make. I don't see race. I'm a good person. For Black and brown people, this is how it translates. I'm going to use my place of privilege to refute and deny the sufferings of those who do not have white privilege, while at the same time erasing their personal and cultural history, because I'm a good person. See, when you refuse to see difference and you become this person who believes that everybody is the same because you don't see the difference, you are actually now becoming part of the problem. Some of the issues that we face as Black people is because people choose to not see us. People choose to be ignorant. That willful ignorance is the reason why people have died. That willful ignorance is the reason why people have not been able to come up in society. That willful ignorance is why things have been slow to change. Because if you don't recognize your difference and my difference and how they should coexist, then those ingrained problems continue and you ignore them. When we erase somebody's identity, we are erasing part of their dignity. We're erasing a large part of their human side. And then that's when friction happens because we can't understand each other. You can't ignore people for too long because that's really what that is. You're ignoring the differences. When you ignore somebody for too long, eventually it erupts, becomes a powder keg. And sometimes that's what you see in the streets. That's what you see with the marches. Sometimes that's what you see with the looting. It's the voices of those who have not been heard. Difference is a strength, not a threat. Color blindness is a lack of appreciation. Point blank simple. When we choose to not appreciate people, then everything we try to do is now disingenuous. Equality is not equity, and equity is not justice. I'm saying it again for the people in the back. Equality is not equity, and equity is not justice. Now, equality on paper sounds good. It's something that we've been fighting for far too long. But we have to realize that equality only goes so far. So if I got hired at Drexel 3 years ago and I'm a director of an area, and my counterpart who's a woman gets hired at the same level at Drexel 3 years ago, and I make $10,000 more than her to start. And this year we realized that that was not equal pay, and she starts making $10,000 more. On paper, we're equal. But how equal are we if I had a 3-year head start? That's why equality doesn't necessarily work on higher levels, because we don't all start the race at the same point. That's why we should be fighting for equity, giving people exactly what they need and deserve, as opposed to giving everybody exactly the same thing. Because if we thought about equity, my counterpart who got hired 3 years ago as well would also get that $30,000 bump that she didn't get a chance to see because I got a higher pay grade. That's equity. Equity is really what we should be focusing our attentions on, not just equality, because equality misses everything that came before you changing the system. But I'm about to hit you with a little bit more. So equity isn't even the top level. Justice is what we try to focus on when we talk about inclusion. Justice means that everybody starts off with the same exact opportunities and possibilities so that you might not even need to intervene to make a person successful or give a person exactly what they deserve. Justice is something, that's the nirvana, that's the heaven approach. That's something that we have to work for and we might never see in our lifetimes, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't work towards it. So when you hear somebody talk about equality, push back and say, what about the equity? Appropriation is common. You have to stay educated. People hear about it. If you're a culture vulture, if you're appropriating this culture for your own, these things happen all of the time. It happens with holidays, it happens with hairstyles, it happens with clothing, it happens with garb, it happens with lingo, it happens with industrial civilizations. It happens with a lot of different things, but it can happen on a deeper level. Because you got to remember where we sit at today, if you are in America during the Zoom account, the fabric of America was woven from appropriation. You know I'm going to tell you how. This little segment I like to call America, You Are Welcome. And that America, You Are Welcome is from the Black congregation. So I'm going to break down 5 different ways in which America has grown from appropriating communities and cultures from Black people to make them more of a white space. Food, Kelly Fonto Dietz, The Smithsonian Magazine. It is the story of people like Chef Hercules, George Washington's chef, and Emmanuel Jones, who used his skills to transition out of enslavement into a successful career cooking in the food industry, evading the oppressive trappings of sharecropping. It is also the story of countless unnamed cooks across the South, the details of their existence now lost. But from its most famous to its anonymous practitioners, the story of Southern cuisine is inseparable from the story of American racism. Kelly Fonto Dietz, Smithsonian Magazine. So tell me, how can Southern food that was created, perfected, and visualized from Black bodies and Black souls become a white space where white chefs and cooks can now benefit from it and kind of nudge out the histories of it. You have to think to yourself, how do these things continue to happen? Something as original as food from the South is now co-opted or appropriated to mean something that it probably was never meant to be. Music, Elvis Presley. A lot of people seem to think I started this business, but rock and roll was here a long time before I came along. Nobody can sing it, that kind of music, like colored people. Let's face it, I can't sing like Fats Domino can. I know that. We think about music. Almost every genre of music that is popular today and not so popular was created by Black and brown people. So when a publication as world-renowned as Rolling Stone does the 100 greatest artists of all time, the Beatles, Eminem, and more of the best, and they list the Beatles as number one, you have to think to yourself, how can the Beatles, which is rock and roll, Eminem, which is hip hop, all Black art forms be perfected, quote unquote, by the white majority? How can something like the music industry make money off of the ideas and the spirits of Black people, and the people who benefit the most tend to not be Black, now making those spaces white? Architecture from the White House Historical Association. The DC commissioners charged by Congress with building the new city under the direction of the president initially planned to import workers from Europe to meet their labor needs. However, response to recruitment was dismal, and soon they turned into African Americans, both enslaved and free, to provide the bulk of labor that built the White House, the United States Capitol, and other early government buildings. These are just some of the institutions built by the hands of Black people, built on the backs of Black people, and prospered in opposition of Black people. Things like Wall Street, the White House, Harvard Law School, even the Smithsonian. These are all institutions of America that helped America become one of the best nations to ever be created on earth. But a lot of these institutions, and many more, Georgetown isn't the only university that was built by enslaved people or free African people who probably didn't get paid fair wages. But each of these institutions at different points in time, and some of them still, have directly opposed Black people from being parts of them. So you have to realize that even architects, even political campaigns, even places like Wall Street that's focused on the economy were built by Black people, which helped it to not be an only white space, but somehow after the buildings were done, it became primarily only a white space. The economy. This is from Greg Timmons from history.com. Slavery was so profitable, it sprouted more millionaires per capita in the Mississippi River Valley than anywhere in the nation. With cash crops of tobacco, cotton, and sugarcane, America's southern states became the economic engine of the burgeoning nation. Their fuel of choice, human slavery. This is what America really is. Black people and people of color build something, create something, and then it gets taken and used. Not for them, not by them, and don't get let in. We can't forget where we come from and only focus on where we're supposed to go, because the issues that we face are so deeply ingrained that it's almost impossible to not trip over them as we allegedly pretend to overcome. And finally, freedom. These pictures, to me, are the quintessential pieces of American freedom today. To the far left, that man you see is Crispus Attucks, a New Englander, Boston, Massachusetts to be exact, a Black man who was the first American to die in the Revolutionary War, the very first one. So if so facto, you can say Black men were the first ones to die for America. In the middle, you have a large group of women, specifically Black women, who are fighting for civil rights. But these Black women also fought for women's suffrage. And when it was actually becoming popular, they got co-opted and pushed to the side and not allowed to come to certain rallies, not allowed to come to certain conferences, not allowed to get the same rights that they were fighting for. In the civil rights movement, there were many backbones of the civil rights movement who were women that got pushed to the side, specifically Black women, when Malcolm and Martin and Eggers and Huey P were rising to the top, all men. So even when you look at Black relationships in white spaces, there still is a hierarchy system. And to the far right, that's the great Marsha P. Johnson, a Black trans woman from New York who was the foundation for the gay rights movement in America. Say it again, Marsha P. Johnson was the foundation for the gay rights movement in America. And now when we think about gay rights, for most people, the first thought you have is of gay white men. This shows you that even when Black people are a part of a creation, part of a deliberation, part of a process, it still can become a white space. So what are we doing to really circumvent that? What makes a space inclusive? What makes it open to everybody? How can we make sure that the people who help build it are the people who remain? What can we do when a space has never been made for people? What can we do to make sure that it's more free and open to others? First things first, you have to know your audience. You have to know your audience. If you don't know who you're speaking to, you don't know who you're trying to help, you don't know who you're trying to walk with, then you miss people where they are. You have to know who you're speaking to. Like we talked about earlier, all Black people aren't the same. All people of color aren't Black. So when you're trying to make a space more inclusive, whom are you trying to make it inclusive for? Understand intersectionality. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Nobody is only one thing. I am a Black man. That's intersectionality, being Black and being a man. Two parts of my identity that make me whole. Understand the complexity of people. Don't just speak to the bare minimum. Don't just speak to the surface level parts of a person's identity. Try to go deeper than that. If you fail, which you may possibly do, don't quit. Don't quit. This is hard. Being Black in white spaces is hard. Fighting for equality, equity, and even civil rights is hard. You're going to run into burdens, just like we run into burdens every single day just existing. So don't quit. The more that you fail, the more you learn. As the great American poet Jay-Z said, I don't take a loss, it's a lesson. And that's what it should be. So if you're trying to create something and it's not working, go back to the drawing board and keep trying to create. We need people to be resilient as we fight for inclusion. Stay educated. This one I can't emphasize enough. It is nobody's business to educate you. You have to educate yourself. I know I'm here technically educating you, so it feels like I'm kind of saying that backwards, but you have to stay educated, because if you end up not being educated, then now you're putting the burden on the oppressed to tell you how you're being oppressive, which makes it even more exhausting just to function. If a person chooses to educate you, that's fine. But you should sometimes come to the table with already knowing things. You should come to the table with solutions. You should come to the table willing to actually realize what you thought you knew isn't really what it is. Safe spaces can become brave spaces. Bare bones safe spaces are where people can operate within their identity and not feel judged, not feel harmed, and feel AKA safe. But a brave space to me is the evolution of that, which means it's a space where people can be their true identity, feel appreciated, but we can have honest, open conversations for all of us to grow and mature. We can question our own identities and beliefs. We can ask people about their own, and it can be a level of conversation that's healthy. But you can't get to a brave space until you actually build that trust in community. You can't just jump to a brave space. You have to have the buy-in. And usually it starts with having a safe space. And finally, allyship is earned. It's not taken. You can't just snatch it away. You have to actually do the work to become an ally. For all my non-Black people in the room, you can't wake up tomorrow and say, I'm here for Black people, and we buy in. It's not how it can go. You have to put the work in. Just like I can't turn my life off, you can't turn your allyship off. It is something that you have to constantly be doing, something that you have to lean into your uncomfortable times and start questioning yourself about what are you not doing and what can you actually do. It's not about being a savior. It's about being somebody who's going to walk, lock, and key. You may not be able to walk in my shoes, but you may be able to buy a similar pair. You might be able to connect with me on an emotional level with something I'm going through, even if you've never gone through it. But in order to do that, you have to actually understand yourself, understand the communities that you're trying to serve, and be there when things are fine. So when things are awful, on fire, not fine, they know that they can turn to you. One of the worst things that happens to me as a minority in a predominantly white society is when something bad happens to another Black person, I get emails and texts from people I don't talk to telling me how much they care about me. Why would I believe you? There's no point to me believing you. Because if I actually believed you, then I probably wouldn't feel as bad as I do because I know I have real community and allyship. We have to build it early and often. So hopefully nothing goes wrong, but when it does, we know who our allies are in those spaces. Inclusive interactions is everything prior plus this little snazzy chart I made for you all. Know who you're speaking with beyond academics if possible. It's easy to connect to somebody at a university about what they're studying. It's bare minimum, it's grade 1, it's the A in the alphabet. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you really want to know somebody and service somebody and be there for somebody and be an ally for somebody, have more genuine interactions, you have to know who that person is at their core, what makes them tick, what makes them get up in the morning. Learn boundaries and work within them. Know your own boundaries, but know other people's as well. If somebody prefers to communicate via email, understand that and try to be attentive to your email. Somebody prefers a phone call, a text, meeting in person when that was still a thing. Try to meet them where they are and also understand where your line is. We only can do so much. As they say, you got to put your oxygen mask on before you can put anybody else's. So you have to know where your line is. If you don't know where your line is, you'll constantly be approaching it and sometimes stepping over, which makes this so much more of a chore than an actual experience. Reach out to just touch base. This is the human aspect of it. You should be reaching out to people in different communities if you're trying to be an ally for them, if you're trying to create an inclusive space for them. Because when things are normal, that's usually when things get built up within community. That's usually where the trust comes in. Very few times will somebody come to you with an emergency if they don't know they can come to you when things are okay. Listening versus hearing. You're probably hearing me speak through this entire thing, and I can't see you, so hopefully you're still awake. But are you actively listening to what I'm saying? And the same can be said for the other communities and the other populations that you are trying to make a more inclusive world for. Because we hear a lot throughout the day. Instagram, other forms of social media, text, emails, people talking to you face to face. All of this stuff is entering our system. Are you listening to everything that's coming through, or are you just hearing that something is being said? Realize when you're doing one as opposed to the other, but you have to actively listen in order to create real change. And finally, you have to pick a side. Silence says a lot more than you think. So pick the right side of history. Silence is affirmation of whatever is happening, even if you don't believe it to be. Trust me, as a minority, I see when people aren't saying anything. I see when people's not stepping up. I see when people are not really trying to be there for me and my community, but once we figure it out, they want to tag along and attach themselves. We all have 3 reflexes when the heat is on. We fight, we fly, AKA flight, or we freeze. And whether you fly away or you freeze, you have to remember that the fight is still active. So at some point, you have to come back around to it. Being silent does not mean that you are staying out the way. Being silent means you've already picked your side. And if you don't stand up and say and do things to change that narrative, it will be written for you. And as somebody who's trying to create inclusive spaces for Black, brown, and people who may not identify the same way you do, you have to realize when your voice and your actions are needed and use them for the advantage of the people whose lives you're trying to impact. Black people have been forced to assimilate, and white people have been allowed to discriminate. Say it again for the people in the back of the room. Black people have been forced to assimilate, and white people have been allowed to discriminate. Is this all Black people? No. Is this all white people? No. Is this the dominant narrative of America? Yes. We got to realize that and understand that. The issues that we face today in white spaces, the issues that we face today outside of said white spaces, a lot of those are ingrained issues. We have been trying to force people to strip down who they are, suit up in who we are, and tell them to be happy with it. We are telling people to change who they are at their core for us to feel better about our existence. We are making people change the way in which they operate, think, walk, talk, dress, hair, whatever it may be, for us to feel secure and safe in our spaces. That's an issue. Just because a person is different from you, just because a person's ideals are different from you, just because a person comes from a completely different world does not necessarily mean that they have to change for your space to stay safe. Most of the time, we have to change our space so that they feel safe and secure. But even when we create Black spaces, historically, we have seen that they have not been safe. To the left, you have Black Wall Street. I don't know if you know anything about Black Wall Street. I'm assuming most of you do, but Black Wall Street was an affluent Black neighborhood in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was self-sufficient, their own businesses, their own doctors, their own restaurants, their own trades, their own clubs, their own economy, their own social gatherings. But the thing about Black Wall Street, it was surrounded by poor, rural, white neighborhoods. And once those communities saw what Black Wall Street was and that they couldn't be part of it, allegedly, a white woman was sexually assaulted. So they burned the entire neighborhood down, firebombed it to be exact. Thousands of people were killed. Hundreds of thousands of dollars were never recovered. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street is just a thing of the past. In the middle, that's the LAPD in the 80s. America decided it was a good idea to militarize our police forces in the inner city. Once again, think about those code words, the inner cities, in order to fight crime. So they gave police tear gas, mustard gas. Some of them even had RPGs, AKA rocket launchers. But one of the things they gave to a lot of people were tanks or street safe tanks. And they would use these tanks to blow down doors in communities and in neighborhoods who they thought were dangerous, selling drugs, had guns, etc. And when they knocked down that door, which also knocked down half of the house, they hoped to find something else. And if they didn't find anything illegal, then you just lost your home. So even if you're staying, quote unquote, in the Black neighborhood, in the Black space, because you don't have access to those white spaces, those things tend to not even be safe for you a lot of the times. And gentrification is a whole topic that I'm pretty sure we can cover in a different hour. But it's not just poor people who are forced out of their areas. It's anybody who does not fit the narrative of the new neighborhood. That's what gentrification is. It's not just about Black and white. It's about changing the landscape of a community and society, painting a narrative and excluding anybody who refuses to fit into that narrative. And a lot of times those spaces are not created for Black and brown faces. So this is technically my final slide. And since nobody has spoken up but me thus far, I hope after this slide, we can have a little bit of a conversation. But finally, to show up imperfectly, but open to change, is better to not showing up at all. Once again, to show up imperfectly, open to change, is better than not showing up at all. We gotta do the work. It's on each one of us. We all have to look to our colleagues and our counterparts and question, what are we doing? What are you doing? And what are we doing together? The thing is, we are not in this fight alone. We can't be in this fight alone. Because if Black people are left to solve the ills of the world, we will never get as far as we need to unless we have our white counterparts, unless we have our brown counterparts, unless we have a community coming together to make sure that these spaces are open and inclusive to everybody. And we need to lean on each other for that. My final quote of the night, because as you see, I like to quote people, is from the great American philosopher Nipsey Hussle. If you look at your circle and you don't get inspired, you don't have a circle, you have a cage. We got to hold each other accountable so that we can rise to freedom as opposed to living in shackles. Thank you. I couldn't see any of you. For some reason, my computer glitched. I was like, hopefully they can see everything. I can't see anybody, but we're going to go through this. So thoughts, comments, concerns, how bad was it? Be honest.
Great talk. I was clapping for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maurice. That was great.
Thank you, Mike.
I do have some thoughts, but I'll let other folks.
Mike, you have the floor. Go ahead, my man.
Yeah. So, and these are, you touched on things that I find myself coming back to and thinking about quite frequently. So one, you're talking about the university as a white space. And this is, I've been thinking about this for a long time, stemming from the research that I did and the learning that I took on in my master's program in higher education. But so in my thoughts, one of the things that makes universities across the board, but particularly white spaces, their hegemonic adherence to the idea of Western Eurocentric epistemologies coming out of the Enlightenment as a universal standard. How do we, in institutions, make way in authentic and meaningful ways for other ways of knowing and other ways of creating knowledge?
I think the first thing is we got to tell the truth about where the knowledge comes from. I think that if we're going to say, oh, the Western society is how this is how it functions, but you don't talk about MOTEP creating schools, then you're already cutting out a big chunk of what education really supposed to be. I think if we're talking about different classes and we don't show people in those classes, people who look like them, who have been foundation pillars and building blocks of said community that you're studying, then we're doing them a disservice. I was speaking to the School of Engineering and Westfall actually over the summer, and they had professors in there and they had students in there and was saying, how can we talk about music theory and not talk about blues and jazz, but we go straight to British punk rock? You know, how can we talk about engineering, but we don't talk about the buildings that were created by Black people? How can we do these things? And I think part of it is being honest about what we're actually teaching people, because typically when it comes to things like history, we teach a part of history and then we tell everybody else to be informed about the other things. When we talk about topics of education, we pick what we like, what we feel comfortable with, and then we let everybody else figure everything else out. I think we have to hold ourselves accountable. We have to hold our faculty accountable too, to say, are you growing with what you're teaching, or are you staying in your safe and secure box? Because I think a lot of people choose to not expand what they can teach, learn, because they feel comfortable. We have to get out of that comfortability, because if we're going to keep doing the same old things and expecting new results, that's insanity. And I think also we got to be honest about what we don't know. I think as administrators, especially at higher education areas, we believe we're supposed to know everything, and we feel ashamed if we don't. So when it comes to us and say, well, you know, this person or this community really did that, instead of shunning that person, we should try to do more research, incorporate it into what we're doing, and be able to change on the fly, as opposed to have those blinders on and say we only can do it one way. Because we can get to the end game taking many different roads, but just because the road is less paved doesn't mean we shouldn't take it.
Can I just also add to that, a couple of things came to mind to me. It's when we're looking at sort of the frameworks and theoretical assumptions or theories that guide a lot of the work that we do from a research scholarship perspective, I think those are significant, and those do come significantly from a Eurocentric standpoint or lens. So how do we look at sort of a decolonization process? Because all of our literature, all of our education, it's been colonized. It's from that colonized stance. So how do you go through a process of representing more of the broad? And so it is looking at that plus. So it is a process I see as decolonization. But I also think bringing in a broader array of theories or theoretical stances to understand more broadly how some foundational principles land. So for instance, we have a lot of information now focused on racial justice, right? So, but you very rarely see any significant work on critical race theory, or that theory has been demonized in a negative way, where it really reveals those issues of power that really come up, that we really need to deconstruct if we really want to strive towards justice. And that's not even equality, but striving towards justice. So then we could really unearth some other information and have other voices and use other ways of synthesizing that information and including broader information to really be able to create broader understanding of different content areas.
With the gospel, Roberta, I love it. Yeah, you're 100% right. And I think that one of the things is people, we only want to go so deep in that soil of oppression. We don't really want to get to the root of everything, because sometimes the fingers start getting pointed to our own cultures and our own communities, and that's uncomfortable for people. And I think that we have to get out of this idea that it has to be an or thing. It can be an and. Like, we can learn about European history and colonization, but we also can learn about decolonization and Eastern and Southern philosophies as well. I think that we focus too much on exclusion instead of incorporating things together, because these things have been built upon each other. A lot of the stuff we learn come from ancient texts, ancient lands, ancient continents, but we don't focus on that. We focus on what is considered the newer version. But that newer version is skewed a lot of the times, and the history of it kind of plays into whomever is telling the story. Like they say, it's his story, history.
I just wanted to comment real quick and say thank you, brother Maurice, because for one, I say thank you because I learn and get educated on our history and on certain things, because you know these invisible walls and ceilings exist, but to articulate it in a way where I feel like a lot of the frustration comes because you can't explain the wall that's in your way. You feel it. It's like air. You feel it, you breathe it, you there, but you can't like this is air, this is happening. And so just having these conversations, it allows you to understand what's happening in its totality. And then the second part I wanted to make a comment on as well is I think America's history is ugly. And when you start digging into how ugly it really was and what was really happening, people tend to like, it's too ugly that I want to dive into it. But I think as long as we try to avoid the ugliness of what has happened, then that's where the struggle comes in, that because it's so horrific that people don't want to deal with it. It's like it's too horrific for me to even fathom that was happening, and it's still happening, and stuff is going on. Like it's too ugly to even want to manage and deal with. So I think once we can get over the ugliness, that'll, start to make progress. But until then, we gotta keep having conversations like this.
Hey Reggie, I'm gonna kind of take that a bit further. I don't know if it's just all about the nastiness of it, but I think it's the ownership of being aware, and now you can't say you're no longer knowledgeable about it. It's now you can't discount the fact that you know, and how you proceed moving forward. Now the ownership is on you because you have the information. As long as you're ignorant about it, you have an excuse. But once you're aware of it, there is no longer an excuse for how you maintain and how you move forward to life.
And generational oppression, just like generational trauma, happens whether we talk about it or not. So we end up chasing our tail, acting like we're trying to be as inclusive as possible when we never talk about why we've been divisive. I'm also amazing at awkwardly staring. So if nobody says anything, I will do that for a very long time.
Something that I don't want to call you a bit like Roberta. That seems rude. Miss Waite. Yeah, something you said reminded me of. So I was in a whiteness workshop series recently and talking about like racial constructs in society and how they affect everything, like colonization and just how the person that led the workshop could explain it way better than I could, let's say that. But how racial constructs affect like how whiteness is tied to capitalism. And I had this thought, kind of all different people were talking, that I think once you start to do this like work and really like dig into being accountable, like was mentioned, you realize that you can't like stop digging. It's like if you're trying to dig to the center of the earth and like you get deep enough and you're like, well, I gotta finish this hole. I really want to get to the core, because then you unearth this entire work of abolishing the systems that are in place, because everything that we have in place, I'm sorry if I'm saying something that's like really obvious to everyone, but everything that we have in place, like capitalism and like mass incarceration and the list goes on, oppresses Black people and people of color. It was meant to. The system's not broken, right? And I think that sometimes like the enormity of like how do we undo this ugly thing or all these ugly things can be daunting.
Yeah, thank you, Camille. And I think that kind of goes to the idea of willful ignorance. I think a lot of people realize that things aren't right, but they can't deal with it today. And today turns into tomorrow, and then that next day, and then nothing ever really comes from it. And I think that if we do it step by step, we can get to it. I think when you have something that's oppressive or something that's systematic oppression, you can't look at it as a whole. You have to look at it as steps and procedures to get to that end. Because if you keep looking at that big wall, you never see each brick that was created in order for that wall to come up. So we got to really break it down step by step. We can't just jump to the end of the conclusion. But kind of like I said earlier, and I'm not saying you're going to do this, Camille, because I know you aren't. But like when people choose to be silent and ignore it, you're now becoming part of the issue and part of the problem, because you are now compliant with things that are not right. And if you don't try to actively change the things that are not right, you are now part of the issue as a whole. We got to get past that ideology. We got to get past that thought. We got to stop looking only at ourselves and start looking at the people around us, because we are one big community, whether we want to admit it or not. We're all in this thing together. And as they say, just because it's not on your front lawn doesn't mean that it's not coming.
And I would just also add, as challenging and daunting as this appears, and it's quite pervasive, humans made it. So it's not like it fell from the sky. It was intentionally, purposely created by humans. So that means we can deconstruct it and transform it to what we want it to be. So it's not an impossibility, but we do have to have the will and desire to do it. And it will disrupt how practices are currently today significantly. And that's what folks need to recognize if they want to align what their spoken values are to their lived values. Because we speak a lot. I don't see the action align with the speaking, but we speak a lot.
Yeah, and I also think that to add on to that, the longer we wait, the harder it is to change. So waiting is not the answer. I look at oppression, I look at racism, I look at discrimination as a gash, not a paper cut. We can't keep putting Band-Aids over it and wondering why it's not healing. We got to give stitches, we got to give surgery. We really got to get up in there and clean it out in order for it to grow anew. We can't build a foundation of inclusiveness on shaky earth. It just won't work, and eventually it'll all collapse.
I'd like to say thank you. Oh, okay. I just wanted to say thank you for this. This was a really terrific presentation, and there are some things that you brought up in your slides that I'm like, oh, wow, I thought that. And oh my God, I'm so glad that, and to your comment about, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. And so this whole, I'm very grateful to the Board of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, because they started me on a path last year with George Yancey. And I felt very hopeless after that. And then Veronica and Ebony White, they challenged me, and I started on an educational, journey. And I'm so grateful. And when you were talking about the suffrage movement, that was something, my husband is a real history buff, and he knows so much, and he's like, I'm terrible. So he put together a list of all the things about our history that I need to learn. And we watched something on PBS called The Vote, and it was an American Experience. And I had no idea. Here I'm thinking like, Susan B. Anthony was this great woman of the movement and all this stuff. And then to come and find out that what they did to the women of color that were so prominent in moving the thing forward. We finished watching that, and my husband's like, what do you think? And I said, I'm so pissed off right now. So it's an education that I'm willingly embracing and really grateful. And I know that I'm going to make missteps, and I still feel like I'm going to be saying stupid things, and I'm glad that there is a space for me to, be that way and still move forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, Roberta, what you just said parlays, actually, I'm glad that I stopped and said, I heard you saying something as well. And I am the chair of the Board of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for CNHP. So again, we're privileged to have Maurice speak. And of course, it was very profound, and I didn't think it was going to be anything less. But I also think in terms of, when you talked about doing something, and then Dr. Waite mentioned about deconstruction, I tend to find that we have these opportunities offered by the Board of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And this is an observation, not a criticism. We tend to preach to the converted a lot, right? So we tend to see similar individuals or the same people. So I would challenge each and every one of you here. I always say each one reach one. So Roberta being a part of the board now, we'll start hearing that, right? It's very important for each one to reach one. So if everybody on this screen brought at least one other person, we'd have 44 the next time. And then if each of those brought one, we'd have, and that's the only way people are going to get these messages. And I hope everyone does reach back and say, oh, I heard about this presentation. I can't wait to listen to it. But I think if we are talking about making a change, we have to move our feet, right? And we have to put some energy towards it. So that's my challenge to everyone listening here today. When you see these opportunities that the board works very hard to get competent and, and learned individuals to come and do these presentations, think about who in your office or who in your space should also be invited and encourage them to take part as well.
And I would encourage to extend that even outside of higher education, start making these changes in your personal and social realms, because that's where we really are very segregated into our own homogenous groups. We're still the most segregated within our country than any other time. So it's within those spaces, to me, where I think really the rubber hits the road. And that's where real conversations can come up, because I think there might be an automatically assumed level of comfort or acceptance, or we all think alike. And you could have some really rich, bold, courageous, brave conversations within those spaces with your groups, your social groups, your church, your family. It has to be extended in those spaces, not just within the workplace.
And to
And
sort
if
of,
you want to learn more about that, thanks, Dr. Waite. If you want to learn more about that, please go to our website for the Board of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, because the recording, and I think that Darren may even be able to send it, I don't know, but George Yancey's presentation, the danger of white innocence, I think that was, if I'm quoting it.
that was it. That's correct.
Danger of white innocence, yes. Profound. So it really articulates a lot more about what Dr. Waite is talking to as well.
And for in an effort of bring somebody else with you, Maurice is going to come back and join us again in the winter quarter. We've got a date lined up for Tuesday, February 23rd. The topic of that discussion, it will be diversity is understood, inclusion is political. And we have all sorts of things on the Tuesday topics page. So please join us for those as well. Thank you, Maurice. That was tremendous.
Thank you. Thank you all for letting me be here.